Okay, welcome everyone to the second part of the NAATI three-part webinar series for Multicultural Queensland Month. A note that practitioners who attend these webinars will be able to claim 10 PD points per webinar under category 1.6 or 2.15. I'll pop that in the chat afterwards just as a reference, as well as the registration link for next week's webinar and some other useful links about NAATI that you might be interested in. Today, we are talking about specialist interpreting in the health and legal sectors. NAATI has recently welcomed Australia's first ever certified specialist interpreters in health and legal. These are new credentials under the certification system and recognises that interpreters working in these complex fields often need highly developed specialist skills to support their roles. We are very lucky to be joined today by Dr. Vicky Wong, who is a team leader of development and training at NAATI. In this webinar, Vicky will be discussing the health and legal specialisations offered by NAATI and why certified specialist interpreters should be engaged as a priority in Australia. That's all from me. We will then follow with a Q&A session. So please feel free to jot down any questions throughout the webinar in the chat, and we will collate and answer these at the end. So that is all from me now, and I will now hand over to Vicky.
Thanks, Trang. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many of you attending this webinar today. My name is Vicky, and my team looks after the specialist interpreter test, including legal and health, and the conference interpreter test at NAATI. First of all, let me tell you a bit about myself. I joined NAATI nearly 2 years ago after completing my PhD in court interpreting. I have legal background as well as postgraduate qualifications in translation and social research. I'm also a certified translator myself, and my language is Chinese. I've told you a bit about myself, and I would like to know more about you, the audience. My colleague Trang will launch a poll, and you'll be able to see it on the screen. If a pop-up doesn't appear, you can access the poll in the chat. Please now take a look and take a few seconds to select the option or options that describe you best. Yep, I can see that the poll is there. Okay, looks like we have nearly half of the audience who have submitted their answer, and it's still ongoing. Okay, so we now have 31 responses, and we have interpreters, we have translators, we also have language service providers, trainer, people who work in policy or program management. We also have people who work in the legal sector as well as the health sector. Great. Oh, if you can't see the poll, you may be able to access it in the chat. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Trang. Okay, so please bear with me. I'm now going to start sharing my screen. Okay. I hope you'll be able to see my screen now. So before I start my presentation, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians on this land and speakers of its first languages. In the spirit of reconciliation, NAATI acknowledges the richness that Indigenous, signed, and all other languages bring to Australia, and the role interpreters and translators played in connecting us all. If you attended the first NAATI webinar in the series last week, you know that our manager, certification policy and development, Mrs. Orly Sheehan, has presented on the NAATI certification system. In today's presentation, I'll build on it and focus on the specialist interpreter test in both health and legal. So I'll provide an overview of the specialist interpreter test as part of the NAATI certification system. I'll also take you through the design of the test and provide an overview of the test components. Okay, a bit of the background first. In 2011, NAATI began a journey to raise its standards of testing and certification and commissioned research on improvements to NAATI testing. The research was led by Professor Sandra Hale, and it resulted in the Improvements to NAATI Testing Report 2012, which was co-authored by a group of academic researchers and experts in the field. And subsequently, a new certification system was developed. The Improvements to NAATI Testing Report has 17 recommendations, and one of the recommendations is to establish specialist interpreter certifications in addition to the generalist interpreter certifications. And the specializations include legal and medical. So here is a slide on the NAATI certification system, which you saw last week. There are two streams, the translator stream and the interpreter stream. As you can see from the interpreter stream on the right-hand side of the slide, the specialist interpreter credentials sit at the top and are above the generalist credentials, which are the certified interpreter, certified professional interpreter, and recognized practicing interpreter. NAATI also has conference interpreter test, which we won't focus on today. You may also recall from last week's webinar that the translation and interpreting profession is a highly skilled profession. First of all, because of the nature of the work, practitioners need to be fluent in English as well as a language other than English, which we call LOT. Formal training in interpreting or translation is also required and is always one of the prerequisites that candidates will have met before sitting a NAATI certification test. To be NAATI certified, candidates need to pass a NAATI certification test, and then every 3 years, they will have to recertify, which involves a minimum amount of work practice and professional development activities to demonstrate that their practice is ongoing and current, and they are active in professional development. So within this highly skilled profession of interpreting and translation, certified specialist interpreters are experienced and accomplished interpreters who specialize in interpreting in the legal domain or the health domain. So certified specialist interpreters are highly competent language users. They have extensive knowledge of the health domain or the legal domain. These practitioners go beyond the generalist level. While they may work in the same institutions as certified interpreters, they are competent to interpret complex, highly specialized expert-to-expert communications, which involves domain-specific knowledge as well as specialized terminology. Certified specialist interpreters also have a sophisticated understanding of their role as members of a healthcare team in the health domain, or their role as officers of the court in the legal domain. They also have advanced knowledge of the code of ethics and are bound by it, as well as advanced knowledge of the professional standards in the health domain or the legal domain. More importantly, these practitioners passed the Certified Specialist Legal Interpreter Test or the Certified Specialist Health Interpreter Test and advanced to the next level in the certification system. To be eligible to sit the Specialist Certified Interpreter Test, candidates have to meet some prerequisites requirements. First of all, candidates must already hold the certified interpreter credential in the language combination, which means you must hold a certified interpreter credential, for example, in Mandarin, before you can sit the specialist interpreter test in Mandarin. Another prerequisite requirement is training. For the specialist interpreter test, this can be qualifications in interpreting, as well as legal qualifications or health qualifications, that is training in the actual specialization field. This is unique to the specialist interpreter tests and is different from other certification tests. Also, candidates will need to provide evidence of interpreting work experience, and the number of years required would depend on which prerequisite pathway a candidate goes through, and the minimum is 2 years. So I know that there are interpreters in the audience. So for our interpreters, if you are interested in sitting the specialist interpreter test, I encourage you to start by looking at the certification pathways on NAATI's website, which sets out different prerequisite pathways. The hyperlink is on the slide, or you may simply Google NAATI certification pathways, and you land on this page. You can look at the different pathways and find out which one fits your circumstances. You also see the prerequisites there, like in terms of the training required and the interpreting experience required. Okay, I'll now move on to the second part of the presentation to talk about the design and development of the specialist interpreter tests before they were rolled out. The specialist interpreter tests were designed and developed based on 3 main instruments: background research and literature review, consultation, as well as piloting. And I'll talk about them one by one. So in the design phase, NAATI staff reviewed the relevant literature, including academic literature, and conducted background research on a number of relevant aspects, including the competencies of legal interpreters and health interpreters. So as we know, competencies are the important skills that are needed to do the job effectively. NAATI staff also researched existing specialist interpreter systems in the world, including in the US. So on the slide, you can see some examples of the literature reviewed, as well as other specialist interpreters test systems in the world. Next instrument is consultation with the community, which include the formation of working groups involving practitioners, researchers, and interpreter trainers. There were also meetings with legal and medical professionals, including general practitioners, medical specialists, lawyers, and judges. NAATI also conducted a comprehensive survey to identify key knowledge, skills, and attributes of specialist legal and health interpreters. So the survey was conducted in 2019, and there were 565 respondents to the survey. And the respondents include interpreters, educators, health professionals, as well as legal professionals. And the survey helped NAATI establish the key knowledge, skills, and attributes for specialist interpreting. For example, it's clear from the survey results that it's important for specialist interpreters to have advanced knowledge of interpreting cross-examination questions and answers in the courtroom. I mean, I'm talking about the legal interpreters. And this corroborates the findings of academic research studies in the field. The survey results shaped the design of the specialist interpreter tests, which I'll provide an overview of the next couple in the next couple of slides. Another instrument that NAATI used in the design phase was piloting, and this include trialing the test formats as well as the knowledge test questions and interpreting tasks. The test design was then refined before it was rolled out. So through research and literature review, consultation with the community, and piloting, NAATI underwent a rigorous process to design and develop the specialist interpreter tests. I'm now going to give you a broad overview of the specialist interpreter tests. As you may already know, there are two certified specialist interpreter tests. The first one is in the legal domain, which is the Certified Specialist Legal Interpreter Test. The other test is in the health domain, and it is the Certified Specialist Health Interpreter Test. So these tests follow a similar structure, and both have two components. The first component is a knowledge test. For the legal interpreter test, candidates will sit a legal knowledge test, and candidates for the health interpreter test will sit a health knowledge test. So the knowledge test is a screening task, which means candidates will need to pass the knowledge test component before they can sit the next component, which is the interpreting test. So in order to be awarded a specialist interpreter credential, candidates will need to pass the knowledge test first and then pass the interpreting test. They'll have to pass both components in order to be awarded the credential. So let's look at the knowledge test. So the knowledge test assesses candidates' specialized knowledge on a broad range of topics, including terminology. So legal terminology for the legal interpreter test and medical terminology for the health interpreter test. The knowledge test also tests candidates' general legal or medical knowledge. For example, in the health domain, the name of bones in human body like femur, coccyx, and which part they refer to. The knowledge test also tests candidates' knowledge of legal systems or knowledge of the health systems, such as, for example, in the legal domain, what examination in chief refers to in the courtroom. The tests also have questions on ethics, culture, and role of the interpreters, which are usually scenario-based, that test candidates' knowledge of the code of ethics and professional standards in the health domain or the legal domain. It also tests candidates' understanding of their role as members of a healthcare team or their role as officers of the court in the legal domain. There are also questions on advanced interactional management. For example, interpreting for multiple people at the same time and how the interpreter manages the situation. There are also questions on research and preparation, which is vital in interpreting practice. So when candidates pass the knowledge test, they will be eligible to sit the interpreting test component, which usually takes place a few months after the knowledge test. Now let's take a look at the interpreting test. So the legal or medical interpreting test consists of 4 interpreting tasks involving complex and highly specialized communications. Some tasks deal with interactions between specialists and well-informed lay speakers in different areas of the health domain or the legal domain. For example, in the courtroom, you may have a judge speaking with lawyers from both sides, and the interpreter interprets for a non-English speaking defendant to ensure that the defendant is linguistically present. The legal interpreter test includes an interpreting task with a simulated cross-examination scenario. If you remember from the knowledge, skills, and attributes survey we talked about a while ago, Cross-examination is an important area where specialist interpreters need to have advanced knowledge and skill in order to achieve interpreting accuracy, which is strongly supported by academic research. Likewise, the specialist health interpreter test includes an interpreting task in the mental health domain, which features a disjointed speech by a mental health patient. And this is also very important in health interpreting. For our interpreters in the audience, if you want to know more about the test, I encourage you to visit NAATI's website and look at the test information as well as the candidate information. You will also find links to the sample knowledge tests and interpreting tasks. So I have some links on this slide, or you can Google search using keywords like NAATI Certified Specialist Legal Interpreter Test or NAATI Certified Specialist Health Interpreter Test, and you will land on the main page. Okay, now towards the end of my presentation, I would like to conclude with my favorite quote. The quote goes like this: achieving quality in interpreting must be a shared responsibility with the many actors and institutions interpreters work amongst. So the responsibility to achieve interpreting quality doesn't solely rest on the interpreters, but it is shared with the people and institutions involved. So when you engage interpreters or translators, it is crucial to engage practitioners with NAATI credentials who have proven their skills and expertise through rigorous NAATI testing, and that their practice is ongoing and current through recertification. Where possible, NAATI certified specialist interpreters should be engaged as a priority in the legal domain and the health domain. And I echo last week's presentation that there are risks involved if you are not engaging a qualified professional for translation and interpreting services. There can be quality issues such as incompetent interpreting, miscommunications, which can lead to undesirable and serious consequences, such as affecting the outcome of a legal case, miscarriage of justice, or impacts on one's health. It can also lead to the loss of trust of the community, reputational damage to an organization, as well as incurring extra costs, for example, to rectify problems. To find a certified practitioner, you can do an online search and search for keywords like NAATI Certified Interpreter. You can also use existing online directories such as NAATI Online Directory and the AUSIT Online Directory. And AUSIT is the Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translators. It is the National Association for the Translation and Interpreting Profession. To use the NAATI online directory, simply go to NAATI's website and we have the link there. Scroll down slightly and you'll be able to search NAATI certified practitioners there. You'll also see their certification type. Lastly, next Friday at the same time, there will be the last NAATI webinars in the series. In that webinar, our manager for national operations, Mr. Michael Nimerick, would take us out of the NAATI certification system and look at the community language aid test. A community language aid is a bilingual worker who uses their language other than English in the course of their work to assist customers or clients. And my colleague Trang will now put a registration link in the chat for the webinar next week. So thank you very much for listening to the presentation. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat, and I'll now hand over to Trang for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. That was a great and informative presentation. We do have a couple of questions from the audience.
Right.
The first question, Vicky, is wondering if a specialist legal interpreter would get a better pay than a certified interpreter, and how much better? Percentage.
Yeah, that I know that is a very hot question, and a lot of people would like to know that. First of all, I have to say that NAATI is the national standards and certifying authority for translators and interpreters in Australia. We have no control over the remuneration for interpreters, but NAATI supports that interpreters with NAATI certifications who have proven their skills and expertise through rigorous testing should be afforded adequate working conditions, including remuneration. If you are aware of the recommended national standards for working with interpreters in courts and tribunals, in the second edition of that publication, one of the standards actually stipulates that interpreters should be remunerated by reference to a scale of fees which reflects their level of qualification and NAATI certification, skill, and experience. Also, there is another standard in the document which notes that an order of preference should be established in terms of interpreters' level of certification and qualification. And the order goes like this. The first one, which should be a priority, is the certified specialist legal interpreter, followed by certified interpreter, and then and then the next credentials are the certified provisional interpreters, recognized practicing interpreter, and then suitable person. So the relevant standards in the document are standard 9 and standard 11.2. I think as an interpreter yourself, I encourage you to be familiarize yourself with the document, and this is also something that you can rely on to justify that when you want a higher pay. So I hope this has answered your question.
Thanks, Vicky. Another question we've got is, what is a community language aid? Is it different from an interpreter qualification?
So community language aid is not interpreter, as I've briefly mentioned, is bilingual worker. So to find out more, register for next Friday's webinar to know more.
Great answer. Another question, is there a resource for knowledge of health and legal specific for the test that can be used?
Yeah, so there are, so I will encourage you to look at NAATI's website to find the relevant test, and you'll find links to the sample knowledge test, as well as the sample interpreting task, which you can have a look at the standard or the types of questions. About the knowledge test, actually, you'll be able to enroll yourself in the course, which currently sits in Moodle, and you can do the sample test yourself.
Awesome. And will NAATI offer or endorse specific training pathways in order to prepare accordingly for those tests?
Yeah, NAATI has endorsed qualifications, and there are different pathways catered for people with different circumstances. People coming from an NAATI endorsed qualification is certainly in one of the pathways. Again, I'll ask you to refer to the pathway document. If you don't have the link, you can simply Google NAATI certification pathways, and you'll see the different prerequisites pathways.
Great. Might just give it a couple more minutes. We've still got half an hour of the webinar presentation. So if there's any other questions, pop them into the chat and we'll go through them. Another question here, I have just moved from Sydney. In New South Wales, interpreters for legal settings are under Multicultural New South Wales. How about here in Victoria?
So the question is about the situation of legal interpreting in Victoria, is it? Yeah, so about here. Oh, okay. I've just
in Queensland, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not in a good position to answer that. I myself is based in Canberra. So I would encourage you to contact Multicultural Queensland to see if there are similar arrangements or establishment.
So I'll follow up on the previous questions about endorsed qualifications. Are there any specific courses on offer, or does NAATI offer any training specific for the specialist legal and health?
So if you go to NAATI's website, if you type in the keywords endorsed qualifications, you'll be able to find which institutions are endorsed and which institution and for which certification type. For example, you'll be able to see such as, for example, UNSW in Sydney, they are endorsed qualifications for the legal interpreter test, the health interpreter test, as well as the conference interpreter test, so on. So I would encourage you to look at NAATI's website and look for those endorsed qualifications. You'll also be able to see like if those institutions offer training online as well as face-to-face.
Another question about the test, is it language specific? Wondering if a Persian certified interpreter could apply to sit for the test.
So for Persian at the moment, it's not available yet. So the currently there are 6 languages available for the specialist test, and they are Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, Japanese, Korean, and Auslan. So Persian is not available yet, and yeah.
A question about some advice. What to do if an agency says they want to use you and pay you as a certified interpreter instead of a legal specialist interpreter because of the difficulty of a given job?
Well, so I understand this question would be like if you are certified as a specialist interpreter, but you are doing a less complex job and you get paid as well, not a lower pay, but not a higher pay. So I understand the question like this. So what I would say is specialist interpreter may work in the same institutions as certified interpreters. But they have proven their skills and expertise in specialist interpreting. But again, when we come back to the actual interpreting, we understand that there are different types of complexity. There are different levels of complexity. And for the pay, I think it comes back to negotiation. And I would encourage you to justify why you think a higher pay is warranted, and relying on the recommended national standards, which I talked about before, to strengthen your case.
Awesome. So a question on training. Are there any training that is NAATI paid, that NAATI will pay for?
Well, to my knowledge, the answer is no at the moment.
Another question about whether there is a Vietnamese specialist test available at the moment.
The answer is not yet. As I said, there are 6 languages available at the moment, and it doesn't include Vietnamese yet.
We have a general question on the PD points and how relevant it is for this test.
PD point. So just let me have a quick look at the question. Explain more about this test. Oh, okay. So what I understand, so usually when we talk about PD points, we talk about recertification, and you have to, like if you are certified interpreter, every 3 years, you have to recertify, providing evidence of your professional development activities as well as work practice. So in terms of our specialist test, if you look at the pathway document, actually there is one pathway that, for example, if you don't have endorsed qualifications, if you don't have interpreting qualification, then there is a one pathway for you to demonstrate that you are eligible to sit the test, and that involves relevant professional development.
Similar question, is there any Cantonese tests available for specialists at the moment?
Yeah, at the moment, it's not yet available.
Mm-hmm. And do the PD have to be paid PD? So do professional development points have to be paid for?
So I take it as for recertification purposes, I mean broader. So I believe the answer is no. It can be paid or free event.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I think that is everything so far. Yep, more questions coming through. You're saying that a lot of tests are not available yet. Are they even planning to be available soon?
That's a really good question. So just give me a sec. So NAATI develops languages for testing according to its language development plan, which is based on a number of considerations, including the demand for testing. And the plan is reviewed every year. As candidates are required to hold a certified interpreter credential before they can sit the specialist interpreter test, the languages that will be developed for specialist interpreter test in the future will be pretty much based on the languages that are already available for certified interpreter test. But the decisions on which languages will be available in the future may also be based on the languages covered in training for this level, which is available, as well as the number of speakers in Australia. So it's a mix of different considerations. Yeah.
There's a question about whether this webinar will be counted as PD, and I'll answer that one. It will be.
Thanks,
10 PD points under category, just double check that one. Yeah, so 10 PD points under category 1.6 or 2.15. So yeah, I will email those details to everybody at the end of this as well, just in case you forget and you want to claim those points later on. So some other questions. Is there any testing or pathway training testing available for the Romanian language?
Sorry, for the Romanian languages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so at the specialist level, there's no testing available for the Romanian languages yet.
Mm-hmm. During the test, do you go to a real court setting or health setting, or do you do it in a classroom setting?
Oh, so at the moment, we have two modes. It can be online. You do it in front of the computer. Oh, well, sorry, I have to make it clear that I'm talking about the interpreting test component. There are two different modes. You can do it online in front of the computer, and also you can go to a NAATI state office to do the test. And for the knowledge test, it is an online test which you use a computer. Again, at the moment, there are two options. Yep, you can, well, at the moment, you have to go to the NAATI office to do the knowledge test. But we are looking at online options down the track.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so some questions about how to claim the PD points and attendance certificates. We'll look into that and get back to you, everyone here, with an email after this session. We'll just confirm the availability of the certificate of attendances, and then you can use that to claim for your PD points. I think that is everything. Let's see. We have a question on recertification. With the recertification every 3 years, does it have to be PD points or going through the knowledge test every 3 years?
No, I think so. When we talk about recertification, it's nothing about the specialist test. So recertification applies to all certification tests, and it looks at your professional development as well as your work practice. And when we talk about the knowledge test, on a different note, if you sit a knowledge test this year, and the result, and if you pass the test, and the result will be valid also for 3 years, which means you need to sit the interpreting test component within 3 years. You don't necessarily need to redo the test again if you sit the interpreting test within the 3 years.
Mhm. Can I just give it a little bit more just in case there's any other questions? If you do come up with any other questions after this webinar, please feel free to contact us at info@naati.com.au, and our support team will get back to you within 48 hours. Okay, I think that we've got everything. Thank you everyone for coming today. I know it is everyone's lunch hour, but I hope that was really informative and you got something out of it. Thank you guys for attending today.